Sometimes the greatest fortunes are buried beneath the greatest lies. The autumn mist clung to the abandoned Los Gatos mansion like a shroud, its broken windows staring down at Elena Vasquez as neighbors whispered about the crazy single mom who'd just bought Steve Jobs' cursed estate. They didn't know that Elena had once been the youngest cryptographer at MIT, or that she'd walked away from a seven-figure career to raise her daughter alone after her husband's betrayal destroyed everything she'd believed about trust. They certainly didn't know that the basement's mysterious locked room had been calling to her mathematical mind since the day she'd first toured the property. The real estate agent had mentioned the room only in passing. Some old storage space jobs had sealed before his family abandoned the house in 1985. But Elena recognized the symbols carved into that basement wall. They weren't random scratches, they were equations, ancient ones, and when she finally cracked the code using principles that shouldn't have existed until the digital age, what she found inside changed everything she thought she knew about innovation, genius, and the true architects of the technological revolution. The question that haunts her now isn't how to spend the fortune, it's whether she can survive long enough to protect the truth it represents. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The hook. The eviction notice had arrived 3 days after Elena signed the papers, a cruel irony that would have made her laugh if her daughter Sophia wasn't sleeping in the back seat of their Honda Civic. 24 hours to vacate their cramped Oakland apartment, and here she was, pulling into the circular driveway of a mansion that cost her everything, including her father's final gift to them both. "Mummy, it looks like a haunted house," Sophia whispered, pressing her small face against the car window. The 8-year-old's breath fogged the glass as she stared up at the imposing Victorian structure, its Gothic revival towers piercing the grey October sky like accusing fingers. Elena killed the engine and sat in the sudden silence, her hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. The neighbors across the street, a perfectly manicured couple in matching athleisure, stood beside their Tesla, not even pretending to hide their stares. She'd seen that look before. The same expression her MIT colleagues wore when she'd announced her resignation 8 years ago. Pity mixed with judgment, seasoned with just enough curiosity to make it cruel. "It's not haunted me, huh?" Elena said, though she wasn't entirely convinced. "It's just old, like an ancient computer that needs to be rebooted." Sophia giggled at that, the sound cutting through Elena's anxiety like warm light. "Can we reboot a house?" "We're about to find out." Mansion loomed larger as they approached the front door, its weathered redwood siding dark with decades of neglect. Elena fumbled with the ornate brass key the real estate agent had reluctantly handed her after the final signatures, still muttering about irregular buyers and cash purchases that didn't make sense. What didn't make sense was why a property worth at least $15 million had sold for $800,000, but Elena had learned not to question gifts from the universe, especially when they came disguised as her father's mysterious inheritance. The door opened with a groan that seemed to echo from the house's bones. Inside, dust motes danced in shafts of afternoon light filtering through grimy windows, and the air carried the scent of old wood and something else, something metallic and electronic that shouldn't have existed in a house abandoned since 1985. "Why did the famous computer man leave?" Sophia asked, her voice small in the cavernous foyer. Elena had wondered the same thing. The official story was vague, some family tragedy that forced Jobs to abandon the property during Apple's early years before anyone knew his name would become synonymous with innovation itself. But Elena's mathematical mind didn't accept vague explanations. Every equation had variables that could be solved. Every mystery had patterns waiting to be decoded. "I don't know yet, baby, but maybe we can figure it out together." They spent the afternoon exploring the main floor, Sophia's delighted squeals echoing through empty rooms as Elena mentally catalogued what needed immediate attention. The electricity worked, miraculously, and the plumbing seemed functional despite its age. But it was the basement that drew her back, just as it had during her first walkthrough with the real estate agent. "Mrs. Vasquez, I wouldn't worry about that space," the agent had said, clearly eager to close the deal before Elena came to her senses. "Just old storage. The previous owner sealed it decades ago, probably asbestos or something equally unpleasant. But Elena had pressed her palm against the wall where the basement corridor ended abruptly, and she'd felt something that made her cryptographer's instincts sing. The surface wasn't smooth. There were deliberate indentations, carved symbols that her fingertips recognized even when her eyes couldn't make them out in the dim light. Now, as Sophia napped on a pile of sleeping bags in what would become their bedroom, Elena descended the basement stairs with her phone's flashlight cutting through the darkness. The symbols were clearer now, etched into what appeared to be a false wall of aged concrete. Her breath caught as her light revealed their true nature. Mathematical sequences, prime number calculations, geometric progressions that wouldn't be formalized until the late 20th century, carved with the precision of someone who understood their significance. And there, in the bottom right corner, almost hidden beneath decades of grime, a date. 1984. The same year Apple had released the first Macintosh. Elena's pulse quickened as she recognized the pattern, a mathematical lock, elegant in its simplicity yet complex enough to keep casual observers away. Her MIT training kicked in, and she found herself automatically calculating permutations, testing sequences against the carved symbols with the methodical precision that had once made her the youngest tenured cryptographer in the university's history. Above her, Sophia stirred in her sleep, and Elena realized she'd been down here for over an hour. But something about these symbols called to her, promised answers to questions she hadn't even known she was asking. Questions about why a brilliant inventor would abandon a house that clearly meant something profound to him. Questions about what someone like Steve Jobs might have hidden behind a wall that could only be opened by someone who understood the mathematical language of secrets. The fog pressed against the basement windows like curious fingers, and Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't just solving a puzzle, she was walking into one. Elena forced herself to climb the basement stairs, leaving the cryptic symbols glowing in her mind like afterimages. Sophia needed dinner, and normal mothers didn't spend their first night in a new home obsessing over mathematical puzzles carved into walls. Normal mothers probably had jobs waiting for them on Monday morning. She found Sophia awake, sitting cross-legged on their makeshift bed in the master bedroom, her dark hair tousled from sleep.
"Mommy, I'm hungry, and this place makes weird noises."
Old houses always make noises, mi amor. They're just settling, like when you stretch after a nap. Elena pulled their emergency stash of granola bars from her purse, trying to ignore how pathetically light it felt. 3 days' worth of food, maybe 4 if they were careful. After that, she'd need to figure out their next meal the same way she'd figured out everything else since Marcus left, one desperate calculation at a time. Sophia accepted the granola bar without complaint, though Elena caught her glancing toward the empty kitchen with the resigned expression of a child who'd learned not to ask for things her mother couldn't provide. The look cut deeper than any eviction notice. "Tomorrow we'll go grocery shopping," Elena promised, though her bank account held exactly $237 after the house purchase had drained her father's inheritance. "And we'll buy ingredients for your favorite. Arroz con pollo like abuelo used to make." Sophia's face brightened. "With the saffron that costs more than gold?" Even the saffron. The lie came easily, seasoned by 8 years of practice, 8 years of making promises she'd figure out how to keep later, of stretching every dollar until it screamed, of watching other children's mothers pick them up in cars that didn't require prayer to start each morning. As darkness settled over Los Gatos, Elena helped Sophia brush her teeth with bottled water in the ornate master bathroom. The mirrors were foxed with age, creating ghostly reflections that made them both look like they belonged to another era. Or perhaps the house was simply showing them what they were becoming, phantoms haunting someone else's abandoned dreams. "Tell me about Mit again," Sophia said as Elena tucked her into the sleeping bag. It was their nightly ritual, the bedtime story Sophia never tired of hearing. "Well, your mommy was the youngest professor in the whole cryptography department," Elena began, settling beside her daughter on the air mattress. "I spent my days solving puzzles that protected government secrets and breaking codes that bad people thought couldn't be broken. And then you met my papa. Then I met your papa. Elena's voice softened despite herself. Marcus had been a graduate student in the business school, brilliant and charming and completely unprepared for the reality of raising a child. And we decided to have you, which was the best equation I ever solved. But Papa didn't like our equation. Elena's chest tightened. Sophia was getting older, asking harder questions. Soon she'd want to know why her father's weekly phone calls had dwindled to monthly, then stopped altogether when his consulting firm landed a client in Singapore. Soon she'd realize that some people valued opportunity over obligation. Papa loves you, baby. He's just figuring out his own puzzle right now. Sophia nodded solemnly, accepting this explanation the way she accepted their second-hand clothes and generic cereal, and the fact that other kids went to birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese while she got homemade cakes and movies from the library. Elena wondered how long her daughter's faith in her mother's ability to fix everything would last. After Sophia fell asleep, Elena sat by the tall bedroom windows, watching fog roll through the valley below. Other houses dotted the hills, their windows glowing with the warm light of families who belonged in this zip code. Families with dual incomes and college funds, and mothers who didn't spend their evenings calculating whether they could afford both electricity and groceries. Her phone buzzed with a text from her former colleague Jessica. Saw your Facebook post about the move. Los Gatos? Girl, what are you not telling me? Elena stared at the message, unsure how to explain that she'd spent her father's final gift, money he'd saved working double shifts at the Ford plant for 30 years, on a house she couldn't afford to maintain. How could she admit that desperation had made her gamble everything on a property that might be worthless? But downstairs, those symbols waited. Mathematical sequences that shouldn't exist, carved by someone who understood patterns the way Elena understood heartbreak, intimately and completely. For the first time in 8 years, she felt the familiar electric thrill of a puzzle worth solving. She deleted Jessica's message without responding and pulled up the calculator app on her phone. Whatever Steve Jobs had hidden behind that wall, it was more than abandoned storage. And Elena Vasquez, former MIT cryptography professor turned struggling single mother, intended to find out what genius left behind when he walked away from everything. Elena's fingers moved across her phone screen, testing the sequences against the carved symbols she'd memorized. Prime numbers, Fibonacci spirals, geometric progressions, each pattern felt familiar yet impossibly advanced for 1984. She was so absorbed in the calculations that she almost missed the crunch of gravel in the driveway. Headlights swept across the bedroom windows, casting moving shadows on the walls where Sophia slept. Elena's pulse spiked. Nobody should know they were here. She'd kept the move quiet, paid in cash, avoided social media posts that could lead Marcus's lawyers to their door if his child support obligations ever caught up with him. The car engine shut off, followed by the sharp click of expensive shoes on stone. Elena crept to the window, staying in the shadows as she peered down at the circular drive. A sleek black Mercedes sat where their Honda had been parked hours earlier. Two figures emerged, a woman in a tailored coat and a man whose posture screamed military precision. They moved with the confident authority of people accustomed to being welcomed everywhere, expected nowhere. The doorbell's deep chime echoed through the mansion like a funeral bell. Elena's cryptographer training kicked in, analyzing the situation with mathematical precision. Unknown visitors at 9:47 p.m., expensive car, professional bearing. Either someone had made a very serious mistake, or her purchase of this property had triggered something she didn't understand. The bell chimed again, longer this time, more insistent. Sophia stirred but didn't wake. Elena grabbed her robe and descended the main staircase, her bare feet silent on the cold hardwood. Through the front door's beveled glass, she could see the woman checking her watch while the man scanned the property with systematic sweeps. "Can I help you?" Elena called through the door, keeping her voice steady. "Ms. Vasquez?" "I'm Catherine Sterling from Sterling Acquisitions." The woman's voice carried the polished confidence of someone used to getting her way. "I apologize for the late hour, but we have a time-sensitive proposition regarding your recent purchase." Elena's mind raced. Sterling Acquisitions. She'd never heard the name, but the timing couldn't be coincidental. "I'm sorry, but my daughter's sleeping. Perhaps you could call tomorrow. I'm afraid this can't wait." The woman's tone sharpened slightly. "We're prepared to offer you $3.5 million for the property cash, with closing tomorrow morning. That's more than 4 times what you paid." The number hit Elena like a physical blow. $3.5 million. Enough to secure Sophia's future, pay for college, buy them stability she'd only dreamed of. But mathematical minds didn't believe in coincidences, and someone didn't drive to your house at 10 o'clock at night to hand you generational wealth, unless they expected to gain something worth 10 times that amount. "May I ask why you're so interested in this particular property?" A pause. "Then, let's just say certain parties have become aware that the house contains items of significant historical value. We'd like to preserve them properly." Elena's blood chilled. The symbols downstairs weren't random carvings. They were a key to something valuable enough to bring midnight visitors with blank checks. Her father had always told her that in his factory days, when someone offered you money too good to be true, it usually meant you were holding something worth even more. "I appreciate the offer, but I'm not interested in selling." "Ms. Vasquez." The man spoke for the first time, his voice carrying a subtle threat wrapped in professional courtesy. "You're a single mother with limited resources who just purchased a property you can't afford to maintain. Our research indicates you have exactly $237 in your checking account as of this afternoon." Elena's hands trembled. They'd done their homework, knew her financial situation down to the penny. This wasn't a casual real estate offer. This was a calculated move by people who understood leverage. "Take some time to consider," Catherine Sterling continued. "But not too much time. Other interested parties might not be as generous with their proposals." The threat hung in the air like fog. Elena watched through the glass as they returned to their Mercedes, noting how the man's jacket hung loose on the left side, the way it did when someone carried a concealed weapon. As their taillights disappeared down the winding road, Elena's mind crystallized around a single, terrifying realization. Whatever Steve Jobs had hidden behind that basement wall wasn't just historically significant, it was valuable enough to bring dangerous people to her doorstep within hours of her arrival. She could take the money, pack Sophia up tonight, disappear into comfortable anonymity, and spend the rest of her life wondering what she'd walked away from. It was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice any rational mother would make. But as she climbed the stairs back to Sophia's sleeping form, Elena felt the familiar fire of a puzzle that demanded solving. Those symbols weren't just mathematical sequences, they were a message. And for the first time since leaving MIT, she had the chance to prove she was still the brilliant cryptographer who'd once protected government secrets. The choice crystallized before her like an elegant equation finely balanced: security or truth, safety or discovery, the known poverty of their current life, or the dangerous possibility of something extraordinary. Elena Vasquez had never walked away from an unsolved puzzle. She wasn't about to start now. But as dawn approached, and Elena found herself pacing the mansion's empty rooms, doubt crept in like the morning fog rolling through the valley. In the pale light filtering through grimy windows, her midnight resolve felt less like courage, and more like the reckless gamble of a woman who'd already lost everything once. Sophia appeared in the kitchen doorway, hair mussed from sleep, clutching the stuffed elephant that had been her constant companion since Marcus left. "Mummy, why are you awake? Did the weird noise people come back?" Elena's throat constricted. Weird noise people. That's how her 8-year-old daughter processed armed strangers showing up at their door, as just another strange element in a life already upended by her mother's decisions. "No, baby." Mommy just couldn't sleep in the new house. Elena knelt beside Sophia, smoothing her daughter's tangled curls. "Are you hungry? We could have breakfast and then explore more." Sophia's eyes lit up with the resilient optimism of childhood. "Maybe we'll find treasure like pirates." If only she knew how close to the truth that might be. Elena managed to smile, but her hands shook as she opened their last box of cereal. $3.5 million. The number pounded in her skull like a migraine. With that money, Sophia could have stability, security, a college fund, everything Elena had promised her father she'd provide for his granddaughter. "You're too smart for your own good, Miha," her father had warned during his final hospital stay. "Sometimes the wise choice isn't the clever choice." Elena's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Offer stands until noon. After that, we can't guarantee your safety or privacy." CS. Her cryptographer's mind automatically noted the implied threats. Safety suggested physical danger, privacy meant others would come. Catherine Sterling wasn't just offering money. She was offering protection from whatever storm Elena's discovery had triggered. But protection from what, exactly? And why did Steve Jobs seal away mathematical sequences that wouldn't be formalized for decades? Elena had run the calculations 3 times during her sleepless night, and the patterns were impossible. Fibonacci spirals that incorporated prime number theories from the 1990s. Geometric progressions that predicted computing advances that hadn't happened until the 2000s. Unless someone in 1984 had access to mathematical knowledge that shouldn't have existed yet. "Mommy, you're making your thinking face," Sophia observed, spooning cereal with the serious concentration of a child who'd learned to read her mother's moods for signs of incoming trouble. "Just trying to solve a puzzle, mi amor. Is it a hard puzzle?" Elena looked at her daughter, really looked at her. Sophia's jeans had a carefully mended hole in the knee, hidden by Elena's precise stitching but still visible if you knew where to look. Her sneakers were discount store knockoffs that would last maybe 6 months. Her backpack for the new school they'd have to find was Elena's old college bag, repurposed and decorated with stickers to make it seem new. $3.5 million would solve every problem Elena couldn't fix with love and determination. Sophia could have riding lessons, art classes, a mother who didn't wake up calculating grocery money. She could have the childhood Marcus had abandoned her to figure out alone. Yes, baby. It's a very hard puzzle. But you're the smartest puzzle solver in the whole world, Sophia said, with the absolute faith that made Elena's chest ache. You told me so. The smartest puzzle solver in the whole world was hemorrhaging money they didn't have, living in a house she couldn't afford to heat, gambling her daughter's future on symbols carved into a basement wall. Elena's MIT colleagues would call it intellectual arrogance, masquerading as maternal instinct. Her phone buzzed again. This time, a photo. Sophia walking to their car yesterday, taken from a distance with telephoto precision. The message was clear. They were being watched, had been since arrival. Elena's blood turned to ice water. These people knew where Sophia would sleep tonight, where she'd eat breakfast, where she'd be vulnerable while Elena played cryptographer in the basement. The rational choice crystallized with mathematical certainty. Take the money, disappear, keep her daughter safe. Elena had been poor before, she could be poor again, but she couldn't live with Sophia getting hurt because her mother's pride had overruled her protective instincts. Elena started toward her laptop to compose an acceptance email, then stopped. Something nagged at her mathematician's brain, an inconsistency that didn't fit the equation. If these people could threaten Sophia, why offer money at all? Why not simply take what they wanted? The elaborate midnight visit, the generous offer, the implied deadline. It felt like misdirection, like someone desperately trying to solve their own puzzle before Elena solved hers, which meant the symbols downstairs weren't just valuable to these people. They were afraid of what Elena might discover. And Elena Vasquez had built her entire career on the principle that when someone was afraid of the truth, it usually meant the truth was worth finding. Elena stared at the photo on her phone for a full minute, memorizing every detail. The angle, the distance, the timestamp showing yesterday at 3:47 p.m., exactly when she and Sophia had been loading groceries into their Honda. Professional surveillance, the kind she'd seen in government briefings back when she had security clearance and a salary that didn't require choosing between electricity and food. Her daughter hummed softly while eating cereal, completely unaware that someone had been watching her, cataloguing her movements, turning her into leverage in a game she didn't even know existed. "Sophia, finish your breakfast," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We're going downstairs to see what Mummy's been working on." Sophia's spoon clattered against her bowl. "Really? The secret basement room?" "It's not secret anymore." Elena pocketed her phone and stood, decision crystallizing like a mathematical proof reaching its inevitable conclusion. "And I think it's time you saw what we're really dealing with here." They descended the narrow basement stairs together, Sophia's small hand warm in Elena's. The mansion's foundation felt different this morning, not abandoned and forgotten, but expectant, as if the house itself had been waiting for this moment. Elena flicked on the harsh fluorescent lights, illuminating the concrete walls and the section where she'd discovered the carved symbols. "Whoa." Sophia approached the wall with reverent curiosity, her fingertips hovering inches from the intricate patterns. "It looks like math. Itis math, baby. Very special math that someone carved here almost 40 years ago." Elena knelt beside her daughter, seeing the symbols with fresh eyes. "Math that shouldn't exist yet." "What do you mean, shouldn't exist?" Elena traced one of the sequences with her finger. "It's like, imagine if you found a diary from 100 years ago, but it talked about smartphones and the internet. This math describes ideas that weren't invented until you were born." Sophia studied the wall with the intense focus she usually reserved for complicated puzzles. "So whoever made this could see the future. Or maybe..." Elena's breath caught as a new possibility unfurled in her mind. Maybe they helped create it. Her phone buzzed. Another text. 10 minutes, Miss Vasquez. After that, our generous mood expires." Elena deleted the message without reading it again. She'd spent 8 years making choices based on fear. Fear of poverty, fear of failure, fear of not being enough for Sophia. But standing in this basement, surrounded by impossible mathematics and her daughter's unwavering faith, Elena felt something she hadn't experienced since her MIT days, the electric thrill of being on the edge of genuine discovery. "Mummy?" Sophia's voice was small. "Are we in trouble? With the weird noise people?" Elena met her daughter's dark eyes. Marcus's eyes, though he'd never bothered to stick around long enough to see how beautiful they'd become. "We might be, mi amor. The people who came last night want what's behind this wall, and they're not very nice people. But you're not going to give it to them." It wasn't a question. Sophia knew her mother well enough to read the determination that was settling over Elena like armor. 8 years of struggle, of choosing between pride and practicality, of watching other mothers provide stability while she provided love and promises. All of it had led to this basement, this wall, this moment where everything could change. "No," Elena said softly. "I'm not going to give it to them. Even though they offered us money." Elena blinked in surprise. "How did you—" "I heard you talking on the phone, and I saw your face when you looked at it this morning." Sophia touched Elena's cheek with gentle fingers. "You had your scared math face." Elena almost smiled despite everything. Her daughter had categorized her expressions with scientific precision, thinking, math face, happy math face, frustrated math face, and apparently scared math face. "Yes, they offered us a lot of money, enough to fix everything that's been hard for us. But I think what's behind this wall is worth more than money. And I think your mummy is tired of being scared." Sophia considered this with 8-year-old seriousness. "Are we going to break it open? Like real treasure hunters?" Elena's phone buzzed one final time. She glanced at it, saw Catherine Sterling's number, and powered the device off completely. The deadline had passed. Whatever happened next, there would be no more negotiations, no more offers, no more chances to take the safe path. "Yes, baby," Elena said, pulling her daughter close and staring at the wall that separated them from answers that could reshape everything they thought they knew about innovation, technology, and the hidden architects of the modern world. "We're going to break it open." For the first time in 8 years, Elena Vasquez wasn't calculating the cost of her choices or second-guessing her instincts. She was moving forward into the unknown, carrying nothing but her brilliant mind, her daughter's trust and the absolute certainty that some truths were worth any risk. The threshold had been crossed. There was no going back. The first blow of Elena's borrowed sledgehammer against the basement wall sent a shockwave through her arms and a spray of ancient mortar across the concrete floor. Sophia jumped back, eyes wide with excitement rather than fear. Her mother's determination had become her own. "Again, Mummy. I think I saw it crack." Elena swung harder, feeling 39 years of mathematical precision channeled into raw physical force. Each impact loosened decades of carefully laid stone, and with every strike, she felt the weight of Catherine Sterling's deadline passing into irrelevance. The die was cast. There would be no negotiating their way out of whatever came next. On the seventh swing, the wall gave way with a grinding crash that echoed through the mansion's bones. Sophia cheered as chunks of masonry tumbled away, revealing not another room, but a steel door built into the foundation itself, sleek, modern, completely at odds with the 1980s construction surrounding it. "That's not from Steve Jobs' time," Elena whispered, running her fingers along the seamless metal surface. No handle, no visible lock mechanism, just a small digital panel that hummed to life at her touch, displaying a prompt that made her blood freeze. Cryptographic sequence required. Attempts remaining, 3. Warning, unauthorized access will trigger security protocols. "Security protocols," Elena repeated, her MIT training interpreting the clinical language. Someone had built this to keep people out, and they'd taken extreme measures to ensure it stayed that way. Sophia pressed her face against the door's smooth surface. "It's like a robot door. What happens if we get the password wrong?" Elena studied the carved symbols on the demolished wall with new understanding. They weren't just mathematical sequences. They were the key to this door, a lock that required her specific expertise to open. Someone had known a cryptographer would eventually find this place, had counted on it. "I don't know, baby. But we're going to be very, very careful." The sound of car engines in the distance made them both freeze. Multiple vehicles approaching fast up the winding mountain road. Elena's heart hammered as she recognized the distinctive purr of expensive German engineering, the same Mercedes from last night, but this time with company. "Sophia, we need to hide. Right now." They pressed themselves against the far wall of the basement, Elena's mind racing through calculations. The visitors would expect to find them gone, scared off by the midnight threats and photo of Sophia. Finding them still here and finding the wall demolished would escalate whatever game they were playing into something far more dangerous. Car doors slammed overhead. Footsteps crossed the main floor with military precision. At least 4 people, maybe more. Elena heard Catherine Sterling's voice carrying through the heating vents, sharp with controlled anger. "The car's still here." They didn't take the offer. A man's voice, unfamiliar. "Then we proceed to phase 2. Sweep the house, find the woman and her daughter. The consortium doesn't have time for further negotiations." The consortium. Elena filed the name away as the footsteps spread out through the mansion. These weren't just real estate speculators. This was organized, institutional, backed by resources that could make a single mother and her daughter disappear without a trace. Sophia gripped Elena's hand, sensing the change in atmosphere. Above them, someone was systematically searching rooms, checking closets, moving with the thoroughness of professionals who'd done this before. Elena estimated maybe 5 minutes before they discovered the basement entrance. Her eyes fell on the steel door's digital display, still patiently awaiting input. 3 attempts. Get it wrong, and security protocols, whatever those entailed, would activate. Get it right, and whatever lay beyond might give them leverage, protection, or at minimum, answers about why powerful people were hunting them. "Mommy," Sophia whispered, "what if we go through the robot door?" Elena looked at her daughter, 8 years old and suggesting they venture into an unknown chamber rather than face the armed strangers searching for them upstairs. The choice crystallized with mathematical clarity, certain danger above, unknown danger beyond the door. She approached the digital panel, hands trembling as she began translating the carved symbols into numerical sequences. The first pattern resolved into a Fibonacci progression modified with prime number intervals. The second was a geometric series that predicted computational advances from the late 1990s. The third made Elena's breath catch. It was her own MIT dissertation formula, the cryptographic algorithm she'd developed for quantum encryption in 2006. But this wall had been sealed in 1984, 2 years before she was born. Someone had known she would stand here in this moment, with her daughter's life hanging in the balance, had planned for it, prepared for it, built this entire puzzle around her specific mathematical signature. Footsteps thundered down the basement stairs. "There!" Catherine Sterling's voice echoed off concrete walls. "I told you they were still here." Elena's fingers flew across the digital panel, entering the impossible sequence that bore her mathematical DNA. The display flashed green, mechanisms hummed, and the steel door slid open with a whisper of pressurized air. Beyond lay a corridor lined with soft blue light, disappearing into depths that seemed to extend far beyond the mansion's foundation. Elena grabbed Sophia's hand and stepped across the threshold into whatever truth was worth killing for. Behind them, angry voices shouted commands as the door sealed itself shut, leaving them committed to secrets that had waited 40 years for Elena Vasquez to come home. The corridor stretched ahead like something from a fever dream, its walls humming with barely audible energy that made Elena's teeth ache. The blue light emanated from no visible source, casting everything in an otherworldly glow that reminded her of deep ocean photographs, beautiful and alien, and utterly wrong for existing beneath a Silicon Valley mansion. Sophia's grip tightened in her hand. "Mummy, it's so quiet." She was right. The sealed door had cut them off completely from the chaos above. No shouting voices, no footsteps, no sound except their own breathing, and the subtle electronic hum that seemed to pulse in rhythm with Elena's heartbeat. The air tasted metallic, processed, like the climate-controlled environments of high-security server farms she'd consulted for during her government days. "Stay close to me," Elena whispered, leading them forward on legs that felt disconnected from her body. "And tell me if anything feels wrong." The corridor extended farther than should have been possible. They'd walked at least 100 feet, putting them well beyond the mansion's foundation. Elena's rational mind catalogued impossibilities, the excavation required, the permits that would have been filed, the construction crews who would have seen this. You couldn't build something like this in secret, not in the heart of Silicon Valley where every development was scrutinized and documented, unless you had the kind of resources that made documentation disappear. "Look." Sophia pointed ahead to where the corridor opened into a wider space. "It's getting bigger." The passage widened into a circular chamber that defied every assumption Elena had made about what they would find. Banks of servers lined the curved walls, their status lights blinking in complex patterns she recognized as data processing arrays. In the center stood a single workstation that looked decades ahead of current technology, holographic displays showing three-dimensional mathematical models that rotated slowly in mid-air. "This isn't from 1984, Elena breathed. Sophia approached one of the displays with fearless curiosity. "The numbers are moving. It's like they're dancing." Elena followed, her cryptographer's training automatically passing the equations floating before them. Quantum field calculations, consciousness transfer protocols, neural network architectures that incorporated biological components, mathematics that represented leaps beyond current understanding, theoretical frameworks that shouldn't exist outside classified military research. And threading through it all, the same impossible pattern she'd found on the wall upstairs. Mathematical sequences that predicted technological advances decades before they occurred. A new display activated at their approach, text appearing in elegant fonts. "Welcome, Elena Vasquez. Authorization confirmed, keyholder 7, awaiting final sequence verification." "Keyholder 7, Elena read aloud. "There are others." The display shifted, showing a genealogical tree that made her stumble backward. Names she recognized from technology history: Turing, Shannon, von Neumann. Lines connecting them to modern figures: Jobs, Gates, Bezos. And at the bottom, highlighted in blue, Elena Vasquez, connected to a man named David Vasquez. Her father,
Mommy, that's Grandpa's name,
Sophia whispered. Elena's hands shook as she reached toward the holographic display. David Vasquez had been a high school mathematics teacher in East San Jose, a quiet man who'd never shown any sign of involvement in world-changing conspiracies. He'd died when Elena was 15, leaving behind only books, love letters to her mother, and the modest inheritance that had made this mansion purchase possible. But here was his name, connected to a network that spanned continents and decades, marked with the designation keyholder 4, deceased. A new voice filled the chamber. Not human, but something approaching it. Artificial intelligence with emotional undertones that suggested decades of learning, growing, becoming more than the sum of its programming. You have his mathematical intuition, the voice observed. But stronger, more refined. We chose correctly when we guided your education. Elena grabbed Sophia, pulling her daughter close.
Who are you? What is this place?
I am the curator. This facility has existed in various forms since 1943, though this particular installation was completed in 1984. Your father helped design the encryption systems. You were identified as his successor before your 10th birthday. The displays around them shifted, showing photographs Elena had never seen, her father in laboratories, working alongside figures she recognized from technology textbooks. Steve Jobs was there, but younger, taking notes as David Vasquez explained quantum equations on a holographic whiteboard, identical to the one before them now. Innovation, the curator continued, is not the random process humanity believes it to be. Breakthrough technologies require guidance, careful introduction, mathematical frameworks prepared decades in advance. Your father's work enabled the personal computer revolution. Your work will enable the next phase of human technological evolution. Sophia pressed against Elena's side.
The robot is talking about you like you're famous.
Elena stared at the genealogical tree, understanding flooding through her like ice water. The timing of her father's inheritance, the mansion's unusually low price, her own irresistible compulsion to solve the wall's puzzle despite every rational argument for taking the money and running. You've been planning this, she said. All of it. You brought me here. The consortium believes they control technological advancement, the curator acknowledged. They fund research, acquire patents, eliminate competition, but they are merely servants of a larger design, one they no longer remember they agreed to serve. You represent a return to the original purpose, mathematics in service of humanity rather than profit. Above them, something heavy struck the sealed door. Catherine Sterling's people had found explosives, or cutting equipment, or whatever tools wealthy conspiracies used to solve problems that couldn't be negotiated away. Elena looked at her daughter, then at the impossible chamber that represented everything she'd never imagined about human innovation and technological progress. Sophia watched her with complete trust, waiting for her mother to make sense of a situation that had spiraled far beyond midnight threats and real estate disputes. What do you need me to do? Elena asked. The curator's response carried what might have been satisfaction. First, survive the next 24 hours. Then change the world. The chamber's lights flickered as another explosion rocked the sealed door above. Elena felt the vibration through the floor, a reminder that Catherine Sterling's people weren't giving up easily. Sophia pressed closer, her small hand finding Elena's with the instinctive trust that had carried them through 8 years of struggle. Survive the next 24 hours, Elena repeated, her voice steadier than she felt. That sounds like you expect them to get through that door. The door will hold for approximately 18 minutes, the curator replied with mechanical precision. The consortium's resources are considerable, but their understanding of this facility's defenses is limited. They believe they are pursuing stolen corporate assets. They do not yet realize they are attempting to breach a vault that has protected humanity's technological future for 80 years. Elena studied the holographic displays surrounding them. her mind racing through implications that grew more staggering with each revelation. My father knew about all this. He helped build it, but he never told me, never prepared me for any of this. David Vasquez understood the cost of knowledge too well, the curator said. He watched colleagues disappear when they asked too many questions. He chose to let you discover your heritage naturally, when the need arose. He hoped it never would. Another explosion. Closer this time. Dust rained from the ceiling, and several displays flickered. Sophia pointed at a new hologram materializing near the center workstation, a three-dimensional map of the facility that extended far deeper than Elena had imagined. There are more rooms, Sophia observed with 8-year-old pragmatism. Can we hide down there? The map revealed a complex that stretched beneath half the mountain. Chambers connected by tunnels that predated the mansion by decades. Elena saw laboratories, storage areas, what looked like living quarters designed for extended stays. At the deepest level, a single large space marked with warnings she couldn't read from this distance. The lower levels contain materials too dangerous for consortium access, the curator explained. Prototype technologies, mathematical proofs, biological samples from projects that were discontinued for ethical reasons. If they breach this chamber, we will need to implement containment protocols. Elena's blood chilled at the clinical tone. What kind of containment protocols? The facility's self-destruct sequence will eliminate all evidence of our work. The mountain will collapse, creating the appearance of a natural landslide. The consortium will find nothing but rock and ruins. And us? Elena's voice cracked. What happens to Sophia and me? The curator's pause stretched long enough for Elena to hear her daughter's breathing, to count her own heartbeats, to fully comprehend the trap they'd walked into. She'd spent 8 years making careful calculations, weighing risks against rewards, choosing safety over opportunity. Now she stood in a chamber that represented everything she'd never dared to dream of, and it might become their tomb. There is an alternative, the curator finally said. The facility's emergency protocols include evacuation procedures, but they require full authorization from an active keyholder. You would need to accept your father's role, take responsibility for secrets that governments have killed to protect. Elena looked at Sophia, who was watching the holographic map with fascination rather than fear. Her daughter had inherited her mathematical mind, but none of her caution. She saw puzzles to solve, adventures to explore, rather than dangers to flee. The trust in those dark eyes was absolute. What does it mean? Elena asked. Being a keyholder? You become part of a network that has guided human technological development since the 1940s. You help determine which innovations are ready for public release, which must remain secret, which represent too great a threat to human survival. You shape the future of the species. The greatest test of Elena's life crystallized into perfect clarity. Above them, explosions continued as the consortium fought to reach secrets worth killing for. Below them, tunnels led to chambers containing knowledge that could transform civilization or destroy it. Between those extremes stood a single mother who'd spent years playing it safe, choosing stability over ambition, letting fear override her brilliant mind. Sophia touched Elena's hand gently. Mummy, your scared math face is back. Elena knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. What would you do, mi amor, if someone offered you the chance to solve the biggest puzzle in the world, but it might be dangerous? Sophia considered this with the seriousness she brought to all important questions. Would I help people? Like when you used your math to catch the bad guys who were stealing money? Yes, Elena whispered. You would help people. Maybe everyone. Then I would be brave, Sophia said simply. Like you taught me. Elena stood, facing the curator's sensors with decision crystallizing in her chest, like ice forming around her heart. 8 years of careful choices, of calculated risks, of protecting what little they had. All of it had led to this moment where everything she'd ever believed about safety and security revealed itself as illusion. The explosions above grew louder. Time was running out. Elena took her daughter's hand and stepped forward into a destiny her father had hoped she'd never need to claim. I accept, she said. Make me keyholder 7. The moment Elena spoke those words, everything went catastrophically wrong. The chamber's lights died instantly, plunging them into absolute darkness. Sophia's scream cut through the silence as emergency systems failed one by one, the gentle hum of electronics fading into an oppressive quiet that pressed against Elena's eardrums like diving too deep underwater. "Curator," Elena called out, her voice swallowed by the black void. "What's happening?" Nothing. No response, no holographic displays, no artificial intelligence that had promised to guide her into humanity's technological future. Just suffocating darkness and the sound of her daughter's terrified breathing. Emergency lighting flickered to life, casting everything in hellish red that made Sophia's face look like a horror movie mask. But even the backup systems struggled, the lights strobing intermittently as if the facility itself was dying around them. "Authorization rejected," a different voice announced, not the curator's warm intelligence, but something mechanical and hostile. "Security breach detected. Initiating containment protocol 7. Elena's blood turned to ice. "No, wait, I accepted. I said yes. Genetic authentication failure. Subject Elena Vasquez I, not David Vasquez's biological daughter." The words hit her like physical blows. Not her father's daughter. 34 years of memories, of bedtime stories about mathematical puzzles, of proud smiles when she'd solved equations beyond her grade level, all built on a lie her mother had never told her. Steel barriers slammed down across the chamber's exits with finality that made Sophia sob. They were trapped, sealed inside a facility that had decided they didn't belong here, that Elena's entire claim to this inheritance was fraudulent. Above them, Catherine Sterling's explosives finally breached the upper door. Elena heard boots on metal, voices calling orders, the systematic approach of professionals who'd broken through the first line of defense. They would find the chamber entrance soon enough, and when they did, self-destruct sequence initiated, detonation in 10 minutes. Elena hammered her fists against the nearest barrier, mathematical panic overriding rational thought. "Stop this! You made a mistake. My father raised me, taught me, left me everything he had." But genetic inheritance was binary, and artificial intelligence didn't care about love or shared memories, or the father who'd bandaged her scraped knees while explaining prime number theory. DNA was DNA, and Elena's apparently belonged to someone else entirely. Sophia pressed against her side, small body shaking. "Mummy, why is the robot being mean to us now?" Elena knelt in the strobing red light, gathering her daughter close as the truth destroyed 8 years of careful planning. She'd risked everything on a genetic lottery ticket that had just come up worthless. Worse than worthless. It had led them into a trap that would kill them both while erasing every trace of the discovery that could have changed their lives. The holographic displays that had shown such promise minutes before now flickered with countdown timers and containment warnings. Elena watched her father's name disappear from the genealogical tree, replaced with harsh red text, "Unauthorized access detected, 9 minutes to detonation." Above them, Catherine Sterling's voice carried through the facility's speakers. She'd reached the security station, was trying to override the self-destruct. But even the consortium's resources couldn't penetrate encryption that had protected itself for 80 years. They would die together, hunter and prey consumed by secrets that belonged to neither of them. Elena stared at the mathematical equations still rotating in the air, formulas that represented human technological advancement, guided by invisible hands. Her life's work, everything she dreamed of understanding, hanging just beyond reach while her world collapsed into 10 minutes of remaining time. Sophia looked up at her with absolute trust, waiting for her mother to solve this puzzle like she'd solved every other crisis in their lives. But there was no solution this time, no clever mathematical insight that could override biological reality. Elena wasn't Vasquez, daughter of David Vasquez, inheritor of mathematical genius, destined guardian of human innovation. She was nobody at all. 8 minutes to detonation. Elena closed her eyes and held her daughter tight, calculating how long they had together as Catherine Sterling's people hammered uselessly against barriers that would never yield. The mountain would collapse, the mansion would disappear, and 2 more people would vanish without explanation in the Silicon Valley hills. All because Elena had believed in a heritage that was never hers to claim. The red lights continued their merciless strobing as precious minutes ticked away, each second bringing them closer to an ending that felt inevitable now. Elena had played it safe for 8 years, and the one time she'd chosen to be brave, the universe had revealed her courage was built on completely false foundations. She was nobody's keyholder. She was just a single mother who'd made the worst mistake of her life. 7 minutes to detonation. Elena's mind raced through the mathematical chaos of despair, but somewhere beneath the panic, a different kind of calculation began to form. She stared at the holographic displays flickering in the red emergency lighting, watching formulas rotate through space with the same elegant precision she'd seen in her father's handwritten notes. Her father, who had raised her, who had taught her to see mathematics as poetry, encryption as art, problems as puzzles waiting for the right perspective. "Sophia," she whispered, her voice cutting through the mechanical countdown. "When you draw pictures that don't look like what you meant them to be, what do you do?" Her daughter looked up with tear-streaked cheeks. "I turn the paper around. Look at it different?" Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not hope, exactly, but the familiar sensation of a problem beginning to reveal its hidden structure. She stood, still holding Sophia's hand, and approached the nearest holographic display. "Genetic authentication failure," the hostile voice repeated. "Subject Elena Vasquez I, not David Vasquez's biological daughter." "You're right," Elena said aloud, her voice gaining strength. "I'm not." She studied the genealogical tree that had rejected her, but this time she looked deeper, following connections the system had tried to show her before its security protocols had activated. David Vasquez, keyholder 4. But the lines extending from his name didn't just show genetic inheritance, they showed mentorship, training, mathematical lineage. 6 minutes to detonation. Elena's fingers moved through the holographic interface, her MIT training finally overriding her emotional paralysis. The system had authenticated her initially, before the genetic scan. That meant something else had qualified her, something the security protocols were now ignoring in their binary determination of biological worthiness. "Show me the authentication sequence," she commanded, her voice carrying the authority she'd once used to brief FBI agents on encryption vulnerabilities. Full diagnostic display. The system hesitated, processing conflicting directives. Elena pressed forward, her mathematical intuition guiding her through security layers that weren't designed to resist someone who understood their fundamental architecture. Because she did understand them. Every line of code, every quantum encryption protocol, every recursive algorithm, they all carried the fingerprints of David Vasquez's mathematical philosophy. The same approach he'd taught her during those long evenings at their kitchen table, when a tired high school teacher had shared the beauty of advanced mathematics with a daughter who wasn't biologically his, but was intellectually his heir in every way that mattered. "There," Elena breathed, finding the authentication log buried beneath genetic protocols. Initial verification, mathematical pattern recognition, 97.3% correlation with David Vasquez baseline. Quantum reasoning assessment, 99.1% compatibility. Cryptographic intuition, perfect match. She understood now. The system hadn't chosen her because of her DNA. It had chosen her because her mind worked exactly like her father's, because love and learning and 8,000 hours of shared mathematical exploration had created something deeper than genetic inheritance. 5 minutes to detonation. Elena turned to face the curator's sensors, knowing the artificial intelligence was still there, still listening, waiting to see if she could solve this final puzzle. "I'm David Vasquez's daughter," she said, her voice steady as bedrock. "Not by blood, but by choice, by training, by every mathematical insight he ever shared with me. You didn't authenticate my genetics initially because genetics don't matter for this role. Mathematical intuition matters. Problem-solving capability matters. The capacity to see patterns others miss matters. Sophia squeezed her hand. You're doing your smart math face now instead of your scared math face. Elena smiled down at her daughter by choice, by love, by the same forces that had made Elena herself David Vasquez's true heir. That's right, mi amor, because this isn't about what we are, it's about what we choose to become. The red emergency lighting flickered, wavered, then suddenly blazed into warm white illumination that filled the chamber with hope instead of despair. The hostile mechanical voice fell silent, replaced by the curator's familiar intelligence. Authentication sequence override accepted, the curator announced, its tone carrying what might have been relief. Welcome back, Elena Vasquez, keyholder 7. Emergency protocols disengaged. Self-destruct sequence terminated. Elena felt her knees wobble as adrenaline finally caught up with her, but she remained standing. Above them, she could hear Catherine Sterling's people calling out in confusion as the facility's defenses suddenly activated around them, not to destroy, but to contain. To protect secrets that Elena now understood she'd been trained her entire life to guard. Sophia looked up at her with renewed trust and considerable pride. You figured it out. Elena nodded, understanding flooding through her with crystalline clarity. She wasn't nobody at all. She was exactly who she'd always been, David Vasquez's daughter, guardian of mathematical mysteries, inheritor of responsibilities that transcended genetics. The universe hadn't revealed her courage as false. It had revealed her courage as chosen. The silence that followed the curator's announcement felt different than the oppressive quiet that had nearly killed them. This was the pause of a held breath finally released, of a storm passing to reveal clear skies. Elena remained motionless for several heartbeats, hardly daring to believe they'd survived, that her leap of mathematical faith had actually worked. The facility's containment protocols have neutralized the consortium infiltration, the curator reported, its voice carrying undertones of satisfaction that seemed almost human. Catherine Sterling's team has been temporarily incapacitated by non-lethal neural dampening fields. They will wake in approximately 4 hours with no memory of the past 12. Sophia tugged at Elena's hand.
Are the bad people gone now?
For now, mi amor, Elena said, but her mind was already racing ahead to larger problems. The immediate threat was contained, but Catherine Sterling represented just one tentacle of an organization that had existed in shadow for decades. They would regroup, investigate, come at this from different angles. Curator. How much time do we have before the consortium realizes what happened here? Unknown variables make precise calculation impossible, but historical patterns suggest 48 to 72 hours before they attempt alternative approaches. However, your authentication as keyholder 7 fundamentally changes the tactical landscape. Elena studied the holographic displays that now responded to her presence with eager cooperation. The three-dimensional map of the facility revealed chambers she hadn't imagined, research laboratories containing prototype technologies decades ahead of public knowledge, archives holding mathematical proofs that could revolutionize quantum computing, biological samples from experiments that had been classified beyond even government oversight. But more importantly, she could see the network itself. Connection nodes spreading across the globe like neural pathways, linking research facilities, academic institutions, technology companies, and individuals whose names would make headlines if their true affiliations became known. The hidden architecture of human technological development, guided by careful hands for nearly a century. Show me the other key holders, Elena commanded, her voice carrying new authority that surprised her. She was learning to inhabit this role, to think in terms of decades rather than quarterly budgets, of species-wide implications rather than personal survival. 7 names materialized in the holographic space, connected by lines representing secure communication channels and shared mathematical protocols. 3 of them pulsed with active status indicators: Marcus Chen at MIT, Dr. Yuki Tanaka in Tokyo, and Professor Sarah Okafor in Cape Town. The others showed dormant or transitional states, suggesting recent changes in the network structure. The consortium has been systematically targeting our members, the curator explained. 5 key holders have died or disappeared in the past 18 months, each incident designed to appear accidental. Your father's supposed heart attack, Dr. Petrov's car accident in Moscow, Professor Williams' drowning in Scotland. They've been dismantling the network piece by piece. Elena felt cold certainty crystallize in her chest. They're not just trying to steal our secrets. They're trying to replace us entirely. Correct. The consortium represents corporate and governmental interests who believe technological development should serve profit and power rather than humanity's long-term survival. They would accelerate dangerous research, weaponize discoveries that should remain contained, release innovations that could destabilize global civilization. Sophia had wandered over to a workstation displaying what looked like blueprints for devices that wouldn't exist in the public sphere for decades. "Mummy, this looks like the thing from Star Trek." Elena glanced at the schematics and nearly laughed despite their circumstances. Quantum communicators, fusion batteries, neural interface systems, technologies that represented careful decades of guided development, each innovation timed for maximum benefit with minimum disruption. The patient work of people who thought beyond quarterly profits to generational consequences. "We need to contact the other key holders immediately," Elena decided. "Coordinate a response before the consortium realizes they've lost this facility." "Already initiated," the curator responded. "Dr. Chen's secure channel is establishing now." A new holographic display materialized, showing an Asian man in his 50s working late in what appeared to be a quantum physics laboratory. His tired face transformed with relief when he saw Elena. "David's daughter," Marcus Chen said without preamble. "Thank God you made it to the facility. We've been trying to warn you for weeks, but the consortium was monitoring all conventional communication channels." "How bad is the situation?" Elena asked. "Worse than your father anticipated. They have people embedded in major tech companies, government research agencies, venture capital firms. They've been accelerating dangerous AI development, pushing for premature quantum computing releases, trying to weaponize biotechnology that should have remained theoretical for another decade." Elena absorbed this information while watching Sophia explore the chamber with 8-year-old fearlessness. Her daughter was adapting to this new reality with remarkable resilience, treating world-changing secrets like an interactive museum exhibit. Perhaps that was the right attitude: wonder rather than terror, curiosity rather than paralysis. "When we fight back," Elena said simply, "we gather our resources, protect what knowledge we can, and remind them that some discoveries belong to humanity rather than shareholders." For the first time in months, she felt truly ready for what came next. Dr. Chen's expression grew darker as their conversation continued. "Fighting back won't be simple, Elena. The consortium has resources we can barely comprehend. Black budget funding, corporate partnerships, political influence that reaches into the highest levels of government. They've been planning this takeover for years." "What about the other key holders?" Elena asked, studying the network display where 2 additional nodes had begun pulsing. "Can we coordinate a unified response?" "Dr. Tanaka and Professor Okafor are establishing secure channels now," the curator interjected. Within moments, 2 additional holographic displays materialized, showing a middle-aged Japanese woman in a pristine laboratory and a younger black woman surrounded by advanced computing equipment. "Elena Vasquez," Dr. Tanaka said with a slight bow. "Your father spoke of you often during our last communications. He was very proud of your mathematical intuition." Professor Okafor leaned forward, her expression urgent. "We don't have much time for pleasantries. The consortium hit my facility in Cape Town 6 hours ago. I barely escaped with the core research data. They're moving faster than we anticipated." Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like her father's old winter coat, too large at first, but gradually conforming to her shape. "What's our strategic position? Resources, capabilities, defensive options?" 3 active facilities remaining," Dr. Chen reported. "Tokyo, my lab here at MIT, and now your father's installation in California. Combined, we control approximately 60% of the network's research archives and prototype technologies. But they have the numbers, Professor Okafor added grimly. Conservative estimates put consortium personnel at over 200 operatives worldwide. We're 4 people against an army. Sophia looked up from the Star Trek-like device she'd been examining. Mummy, in your math problems, don't the smart people usually beat the strong people? Elena smiled despite their circumstances. Usually, mi amor. But this isn't a math problem. It's a chess game where the other side has been moving pieces for decades while we're just learning the rules. Actually, Dr. Tanaka said thoughtfully, your daughter raises an excellent point. The consortium's strength lies in conventional resources, money, personnel, political influence. But they fundamentally misunderstand the nature of what we're protecting. They see technology as commodity. We understand it as responsibility. The curator's voice filled the chamber. Elena, your authentication as Keyholder 7 activates certain protocols that have remained dormant since the network's inception. Emergency measures designed for exactly this scenario. What kind of emergency measures? Elena asked, though part of her already knew she wouldn't like the answer. Complete information lockdown. Research archives would be encrypted beyond current breaking capabilities. Prototype technologies would be rendered inert. Communication channels would shift to quantum-encrypted protocols that even the NSA cannot penetrate. The entire network would go dark. For how long? Dr. Chen asked. Indefinitely. Until either the threat passes or new keyholders can be authenticated and trained. Historical precedent suggests a minimum duration of 20 to 30 years. Elena felt her breath catch. 30 years of technological stagnation. Medical research, clean energy development, space exploration, everything would slow to a crawl. But humanity would survive, Professor Okafor said quietly. Without our guidance, the consortium's accelerated development timeline could trigger catastrophic failures. Premature AI singularity, quantum computing errors that destabilize global financial systems, bioweapons that escape containment protocols. Sophia had wandered back to Elena's side, sensing the gravity of the adult conversation even if she didn't understand the specific implications. Are you going to have to make another scary choice, Mummy? Elena knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes. 8 years old, and already Sophia had learned that sometimes the right choice was also the hardest choice. Maybe, baby. Sometimes grown-ups have to decide between bad things and worse things. The consortium won't simply abandon their objectives, Dr. Tanaka pointed out. Even if we activate lockdown protocols, they'll continue searching for alternative approaches. Other facilities, other researchers, other ways to access the technology they want. Which means we need more than defensive measures, Elena realized, her mind beginning to work through possibilities that scared her. We need to expose them, make their operations public, force them into the light where they can't operate in shadow. Dr. Chen shook his head. Too dangerous. The moment we go public, we become targets for elimination rather than capture. They'd have nothing to lose. Elena stood slowly, her mathematical intuition crystallizing around a solution that felt both inevitable and terrifying. Unless we give them something to lose. Something more valuable than the technology they're trying to steal. She looked at the other keyholders, seeing comprehension dawn in their expressions as they understood what she was suggesting. You want to threaten them with complete exposure, Professor Okafor said. Not just their operations against us, but their entire corporate infrastructure. Every illegal research project, every government partnership, every violation of international law. Elena nodded, knowing she was committing them all to a path that would either save everything or destroy everything. The final confrontation wasn't approaching anymore. She was choosing to create it. Then we don't just threaten, Elena said, her voice gaining strength as the mathematical certainty of their strategy crystallized. We execute. Full transparency protocol, every illegal research project, every corporate partnership, every government cover-up. We release it all simultaneously across multiple platforms before they can suppress it. The silence that followed her words carried the weight of a decision that would reshape the world. Elena could see her fellow keyholders processing the implications, understanding that she wasn't proposing a negotiation, she was declaring war. The documentation required for such an operation would be enormous, Dr. Tanaka said slowly. Financial records, research protocols, communication logs spanning decades. The compilation alone would take weeks. We don't have weeks, Professor Okafor interjected. My facility's compromise means they'll accelerate their timeline, days at most before they move against the remaining installations. Elena turned to face the curator's primary sensor array, her mind racing through calculations that had nothing to do with mathematics and everything to do with game theory. Curator, do we have access to the consortium's internal communications, financial records, evidence of their illegal operations? Affirmative. Network security protocols have been monitoring consortium activities for 18 months. Complete documentation exists for approximately 93% of their operations worldwide. Sophia tugged at Elena's sleeve. Mummy, you're making the face you make when you're about to do something that scares you, but you know it's right. Elena knelt down, meeting her daughter's perceptive gaze. 8 years old, and already reading complex adult emotions with startling accuracy. You're right, mi amor. Sometimes the only way through scary things is straight through the middle. Standing again, Elena faced the holographic displays where 3 of the world's most brilliant minds waited for her decision. The weight of her father's legacy pressed against her shoulders, but it no longer felt crushing. Instead, it felt like armor forged from years of kitchen table mathematics lessons and bedtime stories about people who chose to do right, even when doing right was hard. Here's what we're going to do, Elena said, her voice carrying new authority that surprised even her. We give the consortium exactly what they think they want, a direct confrontation. But we control the terms, the timing, and most importantly, the audience. Dr. Chen leaned forward in his display. Explain. They expect us to hide, to protect our secrets, to fight defensively. Instead, we go public with everything, but not as whistleblowers or activists. We present ourselves as the legitimate guardians of human technological development, and we expose them as the criminals they actually are. Elena began pacing, her mind working through scenarios with the same precision she'd once applied to cryptographic problems at MIT. Simultaneous press conferences in Tokyo, Boston, and Cape Town, live streamed to every major platform. Complete documentation released to investigative journalists, government oversight committees, and international human rights organizations. The exposure would be mutual, Professor Okafor pointed out. Our own organization would lose its ability to operate in shadow. Good, Elena said firmly. Maybe it's time for humanity to take conscious control of its technological development instead of accepting guidance from hidden authorities, no matter how benevolent our intentions. The curator's voice filled the chamber with what might have been concern. Such exposure would fundamentally alter the network's operational capacity. Many research projects would become impossible to continue under public scrutiny. We adapt, Elena replied. We create new institutions, transparent ones, university partnerships, international oversight committees, democratic processes for evaluating technological risks and benefits. We evolve from secret guardians to public servants. Sophia had found a chair and pulled herself up to watch the adult conversation with rapt attention, like in the superhero movies where they stop wearing masks. Elena smiled, recognizing the profound wisdom hidden in her daughter's simple observation. Exactly like that, baby. Sometimes heroes have to stop hiding who they really are. Dr. Tanaka's expression had shifted from skepticism to something approaching admiration. The logistics would be complex but mathematically sound. Overwhelming information release across multiple channels would prevent suppression efforts. More than that, Elena continued, her strategic vision expanding. We don't just release evidence of their crimes. We demonstrate our technologies publicly, clean energy prototypes, medical advances, communication systems that could revolutionize global cooperation. We show the world what they're really trying to steal. A complete paradigm shift, Dr. Chen murmured. From shadow guardianship to transparent stewardship. Elena nodded, feeling the certainty of her father's mathematical training combine with her own mother's fierce protectiveness. The consortium thinks they're fighting for control of secret technologies. We're going to prove they're fighting against human progress itself. The holographic displays flickered as the other keyholders absorbed the magnitude of what she was proposing. This wasn't just about stopping the consortium, it was about fundamentally reimagining humanity's relationship with its own technological future. "When do we begin?" Professor Okafor asked quietly. Elena looked at her daughter, then at the faces of her newfound allies, feeling the weight of every mathematical lesson her father had ever taught her crystallizing into perfect clarity. "Now," she said. "We begin now." The facility's emergency alarms began wailing before Elena had even finished speaking. Red lights bathed the chamber as the curator's voice cut through their planning with mechanical urgency. Multiple breach points detected. Consortium forces have penetrated the outer perimeter. Estimated time to inner chamber, 12 minutes. Elena's blood turned to ice. How many? 23 operatives. Full tactical deployment. They've disabled the automated defenses using override codes that should not exist. Dr. Chen's holographic image flickered as explosions echoed through his MIT laboratory. "They're hitting us simultaneously. Elena, they knew they've been listening to our communications." The display showing Professor Okafor went dark entirely, replaced by static and the distant sound of gunfire. Dr. Tanaka's feed showed armed figures advancing through her Tokyo facility, forcing her to retreat deeper into the complex. Elena grabbed Sophia, pulling her daughter close as the reality crashed over her. The consortium hadn't been waiting for them to make the first move. They'd been preparing a coordinated strike while Elena thought she was planning their offensive. "Mummy, what's happening?" Sophia's voice was small but steady, trusting even as chaos erupted around them. "Change of plans, baby." Elena's mind raced through options, each one more desperate than the last. 12 minutes before armed operatives reached them, no escape routes that wouldn't lead directly into enemy hands, no cavalry coming to rescue them. "Curator, can you accelerate the information release protocol? Execute everything we discussed, but do it now." "Negative. Complete documentation compilation requires minimum 47 minutes for global distribution. Preliminary release possible in 18 minutes, but effectiveness would be severely compromised." The sound of cutting tools echoed from somewhere above them. They were burning through the reinforced barriers that protected the chamber. Elena could smell the acrid smoke of melting metal beginning to filter through the ventilation system. Dr. Tanaka's transmission crackled with interference. "Elena, if they take the facilities intact, they'll have everything. Decades of research, prototype technologies, the entire network infrastructure. You have to trigger the lockdown protocol." 30 years of technological stagnation, Elena whispered, remembering their earlier conversation. Clean energy solutions, medical breakthroughs, space exploration advances, all of it would vanish into encrypted obscurity while humanity stumbled forward blind. "Better than 50 years of corporate weaponization." Dr. Chen's voice came through static as his own facility shook with explosions. "Elena, you're the only one in position to initiate full lockdown. The authentication requires physical presence in a primary facility." Sophia looked up at her mother with 8-year-old clarity that cut through Elena's panic. "You're going to have to choose between the bad thing and the worst thing, aren't you?" Elena knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes as the cutting sounds grew louder overhead. "Yes, baby. And I need you to understand that whatever happens next, Daddy would be proud of us both." She stood and faced the curator's central array, her father's mathematical training warring with her mother's protective instincts. Save the future by sacrificing the present, or fight for the present and risk losing everything. "Curator, how long would lockdown protocols take to fully execute?" 7 minutes for primary systems. Additional 3 minutes for complete network isolation. 10 minutes total. The consortium forces would reach them in 12. Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of human civilization balanced on her decision. Then she heard something that changed everything. Sophia's voice, steady and thoughtful. "Mummy, what if you don't have to choose? What if there's a third option?" Elena opened her eyes, looking down at her daughter's serious expression.
What do you mean, mi amor?
In your math problems, sometimes the answer isn't one of the obvious choices. Sometimes you have to make a new choice that nobody thought of before. Elena's mind suddenly blazed with possibility. A third option. Not lockdown or surrender. Not defensive retreat or impossible offense. Something else entirely. "Curator," she said, her voice gaining strength, "can you establish direct communication with the consortium forces? Patch me through to their command structure." "Affirmative. Communication channel available. Do it." The chamber filled with a new voice, crisp, professional, carrying absolute confidence. "Miss Vasquez, I'm Director Harrison, Consortium Operations. I believe we need to have a conversation." Elena looked at Sophia, then at the holographic displays where her fellow keyholders watched with a mixture of horror and fascination. The cutting sounds overhead had stopped. They were listening. "Director Harrison," Elena said, her voice carrying across frequencies that would reach corporate boardrooms and government war rooms around the world. "You're absolutely right. We do need to have a conversation. But not the kind you're expecting." She smiled, feeling her father's mathematical certainty crystallize into perfect, terrifying clarity. "Because you just made a very serious mistake. You brought guns to a chess match." "Director Harrison," Elena continued, her voice steady despite the armed forces positioned above them, "you're operating under a fundamental misunderstanding. You think you're here to steal technology. But what you've actually done is provide me with the perfect demonstration of why that technology can never be allowed to fall into your hands." The communication channel crackled with tension. "Ms. Vasquez, you're in no position to negotiate. Surrender the access codes, and your daughter remains safe." Elena felt Sophia's small hand slip into hers, and in that touch found the courage for what came next. "Curator, initiate Protocol 7. Elena, what are you doing?" Dr. Tanaka's holographic image flickered with alarm. "I'm making the choice nobody thought of," Elena replied, her mathematical mind calculating probabilities with crystalline precision. "Curator, confirm. Protocol 7 will broadcast our current situation live to every major news network, social media platform, and government oversight committee worldwide." "Affirmative. Real-time transmission of current facility breach, including audio communications with consortium forces." Director Harrison's voice turned sharp. "You wouldn't dare expose—" "I wouldn't just dare," Elena interrupted. "I'm doing it. Right now. Ladies and gentlemen of the world, meet the consortium. Armed corporate operatives currently breaking into a research facility to steal technologies they plan to weaponize. Director Harrison, say hello to your global audience." The silence that followed stretched taut as a wire. Elena could practically hear the panic in corporate boardrooms as executives realized their shadow operation was being broadcast in real time to millions of viewers. "Curator, also initiate the transparency protocol we discussed. Full documentation release, but not in 18 minutes. Do it now, incomplete if necessary. Let the world see exactly what they're trying to steal and why." "Elena," Dr. Chen's voice carried warning, "incomplete release means we lose everything. Our ability to guide technological development, our research capabilities, our entire organizational structure." Elena looked at Sophia, seeing her father's determined expression reflected in her daughter's young face. "Good," she said quietly. "Maybe it's time we trusted humanity to handle its own future." The chamber filled with the sound of files uploading, data streams flowing to servers across 6 continents. Decades of carefully guarded research, technological breakthroughs, and evidence of corporate malfeasance flooding into public domain simultaneously. "Director Harrison," Elena said, her voice now carrying the weight of complete commitment. "You wanted our technology? Congratulations. You've just ensured that every university, every honest researcher, every democratic government on Earth now has access to it. For free. Sophia squeezed her mother's hand. Mummy, you're giving away Daddy's treasure? Elena knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes one last time as the magnitude of her decision settled over them both. No, mi amor. I'm making sure your daddy's treasure belongs to everyone, not just the people with the biggest guns. The cutting sounds resumed overhead, but Elena could hear something else now, the distant wail of sirens. Real authorities responding to the very public corporate assault being broadcast worldwide. Lockdown protocol is still available, the curator announced. Research can be protected, development controlled. No, Elena said firmly, standing and facing the displays where her fellow keyholders watched their entire world transform. We've spent decades deciding what humanity was ready for, controlling the pace of progress, protecting people from their own potential. Maybe the greatest gift we can give them is the chance to prove they don't need protecting anymore. Dr. Tanaka's image flickered as her own facility situation stabilized. Elena, you realize what this means? No more guided development, no more safety protocols. Humanity will have access to technologies they might not understand, capabilities they might misuse. Yes, Elena replied, feeling the terrifying freedom of absolute choice. They'll make mistakes. They'll occasionally choose wrong. They'll stumble and fail and sometimes hurt themselves learning, just like every parent has to eventually let their child walk without holding their hand. The chamber shuddered as explosions echoed from multiple directions, but these weren't consortium breach charges. These were law enforcement responses to a very public international incident. The sacrifice isn't the money or the technology, Elena realized aloud, watching data streams complete their global distribution. The sacrifice is our role as guardians, our belief that we knew better than the people we were protecting. Sophia looked up at her mother with sudden understanding. You're giving up being the grown-up who makes all the decisions? Elena smiled, feeling simultaneous loss and liberation wash over her. I'm trusting that there are 7 billion grown-ups who can make good decisions if they have good information. The cutting sounds stopped entirely as Director Harrison's voice returned, now carrying barely controlled fury. You have no idea what you've just unleashed. You're absolutely right, Elena replied, pulling Sophia close as the chamber doors began to open, though whether to admit rescue or capture remained to be seen. And for the first time in decades, neither do you. The age of hidden guardians was ending. The age of human choice was about to begin. The chamber doors burst open simultaneously from 3 different directions, creating a moment of perfect confusion as law enforcement officers, consortium operatives, and international security teams found themselves facing each other in the underground facility that had become the center of a global incident. Elena instinctively pulled Sophia behind the central console as Director Harrison emerged from the main entrance, his tactical gear starkly contrasting with the pristine laboratory environment. But before he could take more than 2 steps, FBI agents flooded through the secondary access points, weapons drawn, and voices barking commands that echoed off the metallic walls. Drop your weapons. Federal agents, consortium forces, stand down immediately. This facility is under international oversight. The cacophony of competing authorities created a surreal standoff while Elena watched her global data release complete its final uploads. The holographic displays showed news anchors struggling to process the magnitude of what was unfolding in real time: corporate warfare, technological revelations, and the dismantling of decades-old conspiracies all broadcasting simultaneously. Sophia peeked around the console, her young eyes wide with fascination rather than fear. Mummy, why does everyone look so confused? Elena couldn't help but smile despite the chaos surrounding them. Because nobody planned for what just happened, mi amor, including me. Director Harrison's tactical team found themselves outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Their covert operation transformed into a very public criminal investigation. Elena watched him speak rapidly into his communication device, presumably receiving orders from corporate executives who were witnessing their shadow empire crumble on live television. Dr. Chen's holographic image stabilized as his MIT facility situation resolved. Elena, the implications are staggering. We're receiving communication requests from over 200 research institutions. The transparency protocol has triggered a global scientific awakening. Elena felt the weight of irreversibility settling over her decision. There would be no going back to hidden guardianship, no return to careful control of technological development. Humanity would have to learn to manage its own progress, with all the messy complications that democratic access to advanced technology would bring. "Curator," she said quietly, "final status report. Global data distribution, complete. Network security protocols, disbanded. Research facility locations, public record. Technological innovations, open source. Consortium operations, fully exposed." The curator's mechanical voice carried what might have been satisfaction. "The age of hidden knowledge has concluded." FBI agent Sarah Martinez approached cautiously, her weapon lowered but ready. Elena recognized her from news reports about corporate corruption investigations, someone who had spent years fighting exactly the kind of shadow operations they had just exposed. "Ms. Vasquez? I'm Agent Martinez, FBI Corporate Crimes Division. We've been monitoring consortium activities for months, but we never had enough evidence for prosecution. What you've done today changes everything." Elena nodded, feeling the mathematical certainty of unintended consequences cascading through her mind. "Agent Martinez, you should know that what we've released goes far beyond evidence of corporate crimes. We've just given humanity access to technologies that could revolutionize energy, medicine, communication, and space exploration, or destabilize global economic systems and trigger technological warfare," Dr. Tanaka's transmission added soberly. Sophia tugged on Elena's sleeve, pointing toward Director Harrison as he was placed in restraints by federal agents. "Is he the bad guy, Mummy?" Elena considered the question, watching the man who had threatened her family being read his rights, while corporate executives worldwide scrambled to contain revelations that would reshape entire industries. "He's someone who believed he had the right to control other people's choices," Elena said finally. "And sometimes people who think they know best end up doing terrible things to protect what they think is right." The irony wasn't lost on her. They had been doing exactly the same thing for decades, convinced their hidden guidance was protecting humanity from itself. Professor Okafor's display reconnected, showing him in the custody of South African authorities but unharmed. "Elena, I want you to know that regardless of the consequences, what you did today was mathematically elegant. You solved an impossible equation by changing the variables instead of calculating within existing constraints." Elena felt tears threatening as the full magnitude of her choice crystallized. They had sacrificed their ability to guide human technological development, but they had also eliminated humanity's dependence on hidden authorities making decisions about their future. "The sacrifice was worth it," she said, watching news feeds show universities worldwide beginning to collaborate on research that had been isolated for generations. "Whatever happens next, it will be humanity's choice to make." Sophia leaned against her mother as federal agents began the process of securing the facility and documenting evidence. "Daddy would be proud, wouldn't he?" Elena pulled her daughter close, feeling the weight of her father's mathematical legacy transforming into something larger than either of them had ever imagined. The hidden room in Steve Jobs' abandoned mansion had contained more than money or technology. It had contained the key to humanity's technological independence. "Yes, baby," Elena whispered, watching the future unfold unpredictably but honestly for the first time in decades. Daddy would be very proud. The age of human choice had officially begun. The return. 3 weeks later, Elena stood in the doorway of her father's study in the Los Gatos mansion, watching Sophia arrange mathematical textbooks on the mahogany desk with the same methodical precision that had once driven Elena to distraction. Now that careful attention to order felt like a gift, evidence that some essential part of their family's legacy would continue, transformed but unbroken. The house felt different. Not just because the FBI had finally released it back to them after documenting everything connected to their investigation, but because Elena herself had changed in ways she was still discovering. The woman who had first entered the hidden room had been desperate, grasping for financial salvation. The woman who returned was something else entirely. "Mommy, Professor Chen is here," Sophia announced, looking up from her careful arrangement of books. "She brought cookies." Elena smiled, hearing familiar voices in the front hallway. The stream of visitors had been constant since their return. Researchers, journalists, government officials, and curious academics who wanted to understand how a single mother had dismantled a technological conspiracy that had shaped human progress for generations. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, carrying a plate of homemade chocolate chip cookies and wearing the slightly bewildered expression that had become common among the former keyholders. "Elena, how are you adjusting to being the most famous mathematician on Earth?" "Terribly," Elena laughed, accepting a warm cookie. "Though Sophia seems to be handling celebrity better than I am." It was true. Her 8-year-old daughter had adapted to their transformed circumstances with remarkable resilience, treating interview requests and security protocols as interesting puzzles rather than overwhelming disruptions. The trust fund established from the liquidated early Apple stock certificates meant Sophia would never want for anything, but more importantly, she seemed to understand that their real treasure had been something far more valuable than money. Dr. Chen settled into one of the leather armchairs, her expression growing serious. "Elena, I need you to know, the global response has exceeded our most optimistic projections. 17 major breakthroughs in clean energy just this month. Medical research collaborations that would have taken years to establish. The democratization of technology is working." Elena nodded, though she caught the unspoken concern in her friend's voice. "But there have been complications. Some governments are struggling with the rapid pace of change. Certain corporations are attempting to weaponize technologies they don't fully understand. The chaos is significant." Elena moved to the window, looking out at the California hills where autumn fog still rolled through the valleys exactly as it had when she first arrived. The natural world continued its ancient patterns while human civilization adapted to unprecedented transparency. "Dr. Chen, do you regret what we did?" The older woman was quiet for a long moment, watching Sophia stack books with mathematical precision. "Every day," she said finally, "and every day, I'm grateful we did it anyway." Elena understood exactly what she meant. The weight of unintended consequences pressed against her consciousness constantly. Every news report about technological misuse, every story of economic disruption, every example of humanity struggling to handle capabilities they hadn't been gradually prepared for. But alongside that weight came something unprecedented, the knowledge that those struggles belonged to humanity itself, not to hidden guardians making decisions in shadow chambers. Sophia looked up from her books, her young face serious. "Professor Chen, do you think Daddy knew this would happen?" Dr. Chen smiled, the expression transforming her weathered features. "Sophia, I think your father knew that mathematics doesn't just reveal truth, it creates the possibility for truth to emerge. What your mother did was solve an equation that no one thought could be solved." Elena felt tears threatening, but they were different tears than she'd shed in the hidden chamber. These carried relief, pride, and the strange comfort of knowing she had made a choice that honored her father's belief in human potential rather than his fear of human fallibility. The doorbell rang, and Sophia bounced up to answer it. "That's Agent Martinez. She's teaching me about criminal investigation techniques." As her daughter's footsteps echoed through the mansion's grand hallway, Elena marveled at the bizarre normalcy their life had achieved. Federal protection, yes, but also homework help. Media attention, but also afternoon cookies with former Xio conspirators turned close friends. Celebrity status, but also bedtime stories and arguments about vegetable consumption. "Elena," Dr. Chen said quietly, "there's something else. We've been approached about establishing a new kind of research foundation. Completely transparent, democratically governed, focused on ethical technology development. The opposite of everything we used to be." Elena considered the proposal, feeling the familiar pull of important work balanced against hard-earned wisdom about the dangers of believing you knew what was best for everyone else. Would it involve making decisions about what other people are ready for? No, just providing information and letting them choose. Elena smiled, watching Sophia return with Agent Martinez and launch into an enthusiastic explanation of her mathematical book organization system. Her daughter was growing up in a world where secrets were harder to keep, where power was harder to concentrate, where the future belonged to everyone willing to help shape it. "I'd like that," Elena said, feeling her father's legacy transforming once again into something larger than any of them had imagined. "I'd like that very much." Outside, the autumn fog continued its ancient dance through the Silicon Valley hills, and the future remained beautifully, terrifyingly unknown. The new beginning. 6 months later, Elena stood in the gleaming conference room of the newly established Foundation for Democratic Technology, watching Sophia demonstrate her latest mathematical discovery to a room full of researchers who treated an 8-year-old's insights with the same respect they'd once reserved for hidden authorities. The irony wasn't lost on her. They had replaced secret guardianship with radical transparency, and somehow her daughter had become the perfect symbol of what that transformation meant. "You see," Sophia explained to the gathered scientists, pointing at her whiteboard covered in elegant equations, "if you think of technological progress like growing a garden instead of building a wall, everyone gets to help decide what flowers to plant." Elena felt her heart swell with pride and something deeper. The recognition that this child would never know a world where innovation was hoarded, where breakthrough discoveries were passed out by shadowy committees who believed they knew better than the people they claimed to protect. Dr. Chen leaned over to whisper, "She's going to change the world." "She already has," Elena replied, remembering the moment 6 months ago when Sophia's innocent question about sharing Daddy's treasure had catalyzed the decision that dismantled decades of technological secrecy. The room erupted in enthusiastic discussion as researchers from 6 continents began collaborating on Sophia's garden metaphor, using it as a framework for understanding distributed innovation. Elena watched them work together, former rivals, former enemies, former guardians, and former outcasts, all united by the simple principle that humanity deserved access to its own potential. Agent Martinez appeared beside her, no longer wearing federal protection gear but serving as the Foundation's ethics oversight coordinator. "Elena, the quarterly report shows remarkable progress. Clean energy adoption up 30% globally. Medical breakthroughs being shared in real time instead of hoarded for patents. The democratic model is exceeding every projection." Elena nodded, though she'd learned to listen for what wasn't being said. "And the challenges?" "Significant," Martinez admitted. 3 governments have attempted to weaponize release technologies. Several corporations are trying to recreate closed development systems. And there's still the question of whether humanity can handle unlimited access to advanced capabilities. Elena considered this, watching Sophia field questions from Nobel Prize winners and graduate students with equal patience. The weight of unintended consequences had become a constant companion. Every morning brought news of both miraculous breakthroughs and chaotic disruptions caused by technologies being developed without hidden guidance. But alongside that weight came something unprecedented, the knowledge that both the triumphs and the disasters belong to humanity itself. "Martinez," Elena said quietly, "do you think we did the right thing?" The former FBI agent was quiet for a long moment, watching the collaborative energy filling the conference room. "Elena, 6 months ago, a handful of people in hidden chambers were deciding the pace of human progress. Today, 7 billion people are making those choices together. It's messier, it's scarier, and it's absolutely right." Sophia bounced over to them, her face glowing with the excitement that always accompanied successful problem-solving. "Mommy, Professor Okafor wants to know if we can visit his new research center in Cape Town next month. He says they're working on something that could change how we think about energy forever." Elena smiled, remembering when such discoveries would have been carefully controlled, their release timed and managed by authorities who believed gradual revelation was safer than democratic access. Now breakthrough innovation spread across the globe in hours, sparking collaboration and competition in equal measure. "What do you think, Sophia? Should we go see what Professor Okafor is growing in his garden?" Sophia nodded enthusiastically, then grew serious in the way that reminded Elena so powerfully of her father. "Mummy, do you miss it? Being the person who knew secrets that other people didn't know?" Elena knelt down, meeting her daughter's eyes and feeling the familiar ache of her father's absence alongside gratitude for the wisdom he'd passed down through his mathematical legacy. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I love watching you grow up in a world where everyone gets to know the secrets together." Sophia hugged her mother tightly. "Daddy would be proud, wouldn't he? That his treasure turned into everyone's treasure?" Elena felt tears threatening, not the desperate tears of 6 months ago, but tears of completion, of recognition that some stories end exactly as they should. "Yes, baby, Daddy would be very proud." As the afternoon fog began its ancient roll through the Silicon Valley hills, visible through the foundation's floor-to-ceiling windows, Elena marveled at how dramatically everything had changed, while the essential rhythms of the world continued unchanged. The fog still moved with mathematical precision through the valleys. Her daughter still asked impossible questions with perfect timing. Human beings still struggled and dreamed and reached for understanding. The difference was that now they were doing it together, in daylight, with access to tools that had once been kept from them by well-meaning guardians who hadn't trusted them to choose wisely. Elena pulled Sophia close, watching researchers from around the world collaborate on solutions to problems she'd once believed required hidden oversight to solve safely. Outside, the future rolled forward like fog through ancient hills, beautiful, unpredictable, and finally, genuinely free.